Good morning, this is Shindo. This is an opinion piece from Newsweek just to show how things are ratcheting up between NATO and the countries of NATO and the countries that are to the eastern part of NATO, such as Turkey. This is an opinion piece. This is not my opinion. Personally, I believe that NATO should have been dissolved after the Soviet Union was dissolved. It had no purpose but to prevent the Soviet Union from attacking Europe. So, this is an opinion piece, not my opinion, but I thought I would read it to you so that you could see the rhetoric that comes out of the West. Yes, I am in the West, but this is the rhetoric that we are supposed to believe, hook, line, and sinker from the West, from Newsweek. A man named Doug Bandow. I will give you a link, as I always do, to this opinion article. Turkey should be thrown out of NATO. This article first appeared on the Cato Institute site. Turkey's brief democratic movement is ending. The rise of Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the development of the Justice Party, AKP, in 2002 signaled the collapse of the militarized secular republic created by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. The recent failed coup effectively killed the semi-liberal democracy that briefly replaced Kemalism. NATO is an anachronism and anchors membership even more so. Today, Turkey undermines U.S. and European security as Ankara moves towards an authoritarian one-party state. A civil divorce would be best for all parties. Erdogan believes as the reformer Turkey has spent decades waiting for. Erdogan began as the reformer Turkey had spent decades waiting for. He was supported by liberals hoping for more democratic and open society. Europeans saw Erdogan as the man to take Turkey into the European Union. And he delivered, at least until the AKP won its third consecutive election in 2010. Then he began moving in an unmistakable authoritarian direction. Corruption spread, but police and prosecutors who asked too many questions were replaced. Military officers and others were convicted of fantastic charges based on fabricated evidence. Journalism became a risky profession, with entire media companies seized by his government. Thousands criticizing the president were prosecuted. Erdogan also abandoned the ceasefire he had negotiated with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, winning votes from nationalists. Ankara attempted to drag the U.S. into the conflict against the government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, while accommodating ISIS as its conquered territory and terrorized captive residents. That is supposed to be ridiculous. They attempted to drag the U.S. into the conflict against Assad. The United States have been chopping at the bit to go against Assad. That's utter BS, folks. Last fall, his government threatened to spread the conflict by shooting down Russian aircraft for briefly violating Turkish airspace. Erdogan redoubled domestic repression after the failed putsch threatened it as the equivalent of the Reichstag fire for the Nazis, an excuse to launch countrywide crackdown. Okay, here it only took a few paragraphs before they're compared to the Nazis. So it seems to be a very popular thing to do lately, compare somebody you don't like to the Nazis. The Great Purge obviously was prepared well in advance. The regime arrested, fired, or suspended tens of thousands of state officials and private employees. The regime also seized or closed foundations, schools, labor groups, universities, newspapers, and online publications. As Turkey descends more deeply into repression and conflict, its value to NATO decreases. Ankar's 1952 membership is a Cold War artifact. The Soviet Union no longer exists, and there is no evidence that Moscow plans to stage a blitzkrieg through the Balkans, let alone the Atlantic Ocean. That I agree with. Russia's brutal treatment of Georgia and Ukraine is essentially defensive against the expanding NATO, not offensive in attempting to recreate the Soviet Empire. There is no renewed Russian threat for Turkey to combat. Turkey's prime military benefit to Washington is access to the Ikalarik air base, which is not in fact contingent on Ankara being part of NATO. Moreover, the Erdogan government's cooperation is not guaranteed even today. As I point out in Forbes, Turkey, quote, Turkey probably would not even qualify for alliance membership today, is engulfed in multiple conflicts, largely of its own making. The extraordinary brutal military campaign in the 1980s and 1990s against the large Kurdish minority should have induced Western intervention had the culprit not been the member of NATO. Now the conflict burns anew, unquote. Moreover, early in the Civil War, the Erdogan government backed the ouster of Assad and attempted to drag the U.S. into the horrid imbroglio. The Turkish government also aided the rise of ISIS by turning a blind eye to the latter's cross-border activities, a decision which backfired badly after the groups launched attacks. Well, so what? I mean, CIA created ISIS. At the same time, Turkey no longer meets the democracy and human rights standards for new members. In fact, Secretary of State John Kerry warned Ankara against moving away from the alliance, quote, requirement with respect to democracy, unquote, in the aftermath of the coup. NATO is willing to overlook such blemishes in the past, but today's descent to authoritarianism is much harder to accept. In fact, the regime is distancing itself from the West, with some officials even blaming Washington for the coup. The collapse of Turkish democracy is a tragedy for Turkey's citizenship, and the problem for other nations. Turkey's voluntary departure from NATO would best serve America and Europe's interest. Geez, he lays out all of the reasons why the United States should be against Turkey, and then he suggests that the idea that the CIA and Washington may have been behind the coup as ridiculous. You figure that out. You know why? I mean, the United States couldn't possibly be behind the coup because the United States wouldn't do things like that. The United States have never done things like that with the CIA. Caused a coup in Iran that put the Shah in or anything like that. I think it really comes down to this. Do you want to see allies, it doesn't matter who they are, what country they are, helping the United States to fight terrorism in that region? Or are you more concerned with Russia trying to attack Europe? And if it's the former and not the latter, then you should be interested in anyone being a member of NATO or any alliance that would help the United States to fight terrorists in that region. However, Turkey is making the claim, rightly, that the United States is harboring the terrorists that have been attacking in Turkey. This is all a huge mess that's going to be given to the next president of the United States. If that next president of the United States is Clinton, who is a complete war hawk, and that's the reason why the Russians don't like her. If that next person is Clinton, I can assure you we'll be at war in this region in no time. If that next person is Trump, then we'll be at war just in a matter of time after a peace. So it doesn't matter who the president is, because, as I have stated and will continue to state, we are in a giant economic bubble that is about to be burst, and once it's burst, they are going to be looking for opportunities to seize natural resources from other countries. Yes, the United States of America does that. Yes, the United States of America is an imperialist country. Yes, 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 yes. And anyone who denies that is a liar and a fool, and you need to get your head out of the sand. This is Shindo. Have a good day.